process of creation is never a straight line, right? I don't know if
Yeah,
you've ever seen that
absolutely.
meme where it's like it's like a squiggly line. Like this is where it happens, and it's back and forth
Yeah, yeah.
all over the
It's
place.
never like that. It's always like
Yeah,
woo,
it
and
goes
then you
all
get
over the
there.
place. And I think that like
Yeah,
the creation of this is going to be no different.
yeah.
It's going to be very messy. We're going to look back at these initial episodes
And
and
go, holy shit, that was a mess.
yeah, it was like trash. Um, yeah, the sound quality would be better, the video quality would be better. It was like we'll figure it out.
So
We'll have
I'm Steph.
we'll have
I'm
to get better as an intro, right? Uh,
yeah,
and I'm John. Um,
yeah.
and Steph, where are you based? Let's get that
I'm
up
based
because
in Lincoln
people
in
will
the
pick up that we
UK.
clearly have different accents. So
Yeah. I'm based in Lincoln in the UK. And if you're tuning in and you're not from the UK, Lincoln is like smack bang in the middle of the country.
okay.
Yeah. So
And I am
um,
from Philadelphia, in the US, which, if you look on a map, it's about smack dab between New York City and Washington, D.C. So I'm about 2 hours from New York and about 2.5 from D.C. So I'm
yours
right.
is way cooler than mine.
What's that?
I'm like, yours is way cooler than mine. Damn it.
Like, yeah.
Like,
Uh,
oh, for my God.
get started. So tell me a little bit more because I know your background was in design, right? And then you,
Yeah, so I actually I used to teach in a high school. And I used to teach English and performing arts. And then I decided that I wasn't creative enough. I wasn't didn't feel fulfilled. So I went back to uni while still working. Um, and I did a degree in design and creative writing. Um, and I was like, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with those, but I want to be able to, like, they're my favorite things to do. So that's what I did. And obviously I still had my teaching stuff, so it's fine. And then yeah, graduated from there. And then I got a job in marketing, which I hadn't really considered before. But then I got into marketing and I was like, oh, it's really creative. Well,
yeah,
there's lots of facets to marketing, but the bit I was working on and still working now in my 9 to 5, it's quite creative, and I come up with like the campaign ideas, and I design some of the social stuff and like some of our posters and leaflets, and then I deal with our social media and I write some of our copy. So I'm getting to utilize all of those. And the whole reason I started photography was not to become a photographer. It was as an additional skill for marketing. So I already had design and creative writing, which I was utilizing. And while I was there, they would put me through a videography course. Um, so I was doing some of our promotional videos, and I was like, oh, one thing that's missing is photography. I was like, oh, I'll have a little go at it. I quite enjoy taking photos. This was just like on my phone. I quite enjoy taking photos.
yeah,
Um, and then it just kind of went from there. And my friend, so my partner works with someone who's a motorsport photographer, and he needed a logo designing for his website. And I obviously have a background in design, and I wanted to learn photography. So I was like, can we do a skill swap? And you take me out for a couple of photography things, and I'll design a logo for you. And I was like, yeah. So that's what we did. Um, and the first time I went out, I was so shocking. And he kept on talking about like settings. I didn't understand what he was going on about. I was like, but how do you know when to change it though? I was like, how do you know? He was like, well, it's to do with different lighting and you just get to know it. I was like, but how do you get to know it?
mhm,
Like, what do I do? Like, oh, this is so much more complicated than I thought it was going to be, because naively, before I got into photography, I just thought it was like, it's not that hard. You just point and click. Like,
right.
why is it such a big deal? And I think a lot of people do think like that. If you're not in the know. And because the phones are pretty good now as well, they're like, oh, I can take some good photos on my phone. And it's only when you become more integrated into photography, you see the difference in quality and what makes a good piece of art or a good image, and the colors and color grading and all of this and lighting. And so yeah, so I never said my books were open for photography. I just started posting online. I was like, I'll start a TikTok about it, because again, where I work in marketing, it's in the health industry. So I was like, I want to show that I can show something else within social media on other than health stuff. So I was like, I'll just start a little TikTok. I didn't put any much strategy behind it, or I was just like, I'll just get things out. And then people started to book me. And I remember the first person who ever booked me, I was too afraid to charge her because she was like, oh, and I'd only been doing it like maybe 6 months. And she was like, oh, can I book a shoot with you? I was like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, sure. And she was like, how much do you charge? I was like, it's all right, I'll just do it for free because I don't know who. So she tried to book with me, and she did book with me, and she was lovely. But I was shitting my pants a bit because I was like, I don't feel like I should be doing this because I've been doing it 6 months. And then someone else saw those photos and so on and so on. And then it's just kind of grown, and now I'm obsessed.
So how did
And
you go, like, so what were some of the, like, when you say we were starting to get into photography, like what were you photographing then? Because you did a big pivot into like the more like heavy Photoshop fantasy style photography, which is like
yeah,
that's not a starting point, right?
no, no.
Like you just don't go in and just go, I'm gonna go do that because it is so layered and complex. Like where like was it a switch turned on? You were like, oh, I just want to play with this, and then all of a sudden the floodgates open. Like, how did that? Where did you start and where did you end? Like, how did that work?
So yeah, at the start I was just shooting everything and anything. So like buildings that I found interesting to like random people on the street, which looked quite cool, to roping my son or my friends in, or anyone who could. And then I'd even just to practice my settings, I'd photograph like a can of Coke or like a door handle or something just to practice and practice and practice. And then again on TikTok, so my first client came from TikTok, and then again, I someone reached out to me on TikTok and was like, we're holding this futuristic fashion photo shoot. Would you come and shoot it?" And I was like, yes, I would. So I went there, and then and they all had all these really cool, elaborate like clothing on, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I took some really cool shots in London, and then I got back, and I remember thinking, I feel like there's something missing. Like these don't feel as futuristic as they want, and they've got these elaborate costumes, but then they're just like in a street. And I was like, oh. So I was like, oh, I wonder how I can add it to make it look like neon-y, cyberpunky. So I looked up a tutorial online, and it showed that, and then I was like, oh my god, this is magical. And then I watched another one, and I watched another one, and then before I knew it, I was like binge watching Photoshop tutorials. And I had tried to learn. I knew basics of Photoshop, but I didn't know it comprehensively at all. Because what I'd used in my design work has been like InDesign rather than Photoshop.
Yeah.
So I was a bit like, and um, and then I just practiced and practiced and practiced and binge watched and nearly threw my laptop out about 5,000 times because I got really frustrated. And then it was like something just clicked, and I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, let me try this on the next shoot and the next shoot and the next shoot. And then that's how it kind of came about from that one like futuristic fashion shoot.
That's very cool. Like, and what you were talking about like before, and with the studying of the Photoshop, like I think that most people look at like most arts as being, oh, they're talented, and in a lot of ways, like people have talents in things, but it's the accumulation of skills. Like talent gets you to like this part, and then it's the
Yeah.
accumulation of skills and the time and the hours it takes to learn like how to use it, how to use
Hours of
Photoshop.
spent. Yeah.
It's the accumulation of skills is like the part that makes somebody special. Like the talent will only get you so far, and then yeah, yeah, there are plenty of people who know how to use a phone. They can compose an image,
Yeah.
and they just have a natural eye for what looks good.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
to be able to recreate that in different settings and different lighting conditions, and like once you start getting into the nuances, like that's where the skills have to be applied, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's like the big difference. And it's like, oh, that's where the hard work comes in, you know?
And I also think it's important that like you don't go, oh, I've learned this now and that's it. Like I'm still constantly learning, constantly going, oh, I want to learn how to do this. And there'll be another fandangled thing that I didn't know it could do. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, I'm going to try that. Or it might be something I already know how to do, whether that's photography or the editing side, but I want to make it better because it's not quite as good as I want it to be.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I've become like really pernickety about what I put out. Um, and whereas before I would think that was a good image, and now look, I'm like, no, that's shit. I'm not putting that out. That's got my name on it. No.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
there's
really
some images like
pernickety
I
now.
can't believe I posted that like
Yeah.
5, 6 years ago, whatever it was, because like but then there's some stuff that like that I see I've gone back to. I'm like, oh wow, I haven't done something like that in a long time because I think there's two tracks, right? And or at least I've run into this where it's once it becomes something you're doing for money and it's a job, like sometimes I take fewer risks and I go back to like the thing I know that works because that's what's going to pay the bills, as
Yeah.
opposed
Yeah.
to no, like sometimes I just got to like push the envelope again. And when I was doing it just as a hobby, I didn't care. So I was going to experiment more. And some of
Yeah.
those came out like wonderful because I was just free with it. And I think that that's for artists who are transitioning to being a business of art is to continue to push those boundaries because sometimes it's easier to play it safe because you don't want to you only got one shot with that client theoretically.
Yeah.
You really don't. But
Do you know what though? I have a theory, and I'm very new to it to the industry really. I've only been doing photography a year and a bit, but just with clients in general, I'm like, if you don't like what I do, there are so many other incredibly talented artists, photographers, and so on. And I'm like, if you don't like it, then don't hire me. That's okay. But I don't want to be everyone's cup of tea. I've said this to you before.
yeah,
I want to push boundaries. I want it to be a bit unusual and a bit like, oh, okay. And if they don't like that, that's fine. But then they're not my client. And I would say the same to you. Like you need to enjoy the stuff that you're doing. But I guess it is difficult when you need to pay the bills. So I've got a 9 to 5 that I can lean on
yeah,
so that I can go, no, I'm not going to do that. Or yeah, I'll do that. Because I can lean on my 9 to 5. But when I've left my 9 to 5 and this is full time for me, which hopefully it will be, then obviously I might change my tune then. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm still going to try and do all the things that I want to do.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a good mentality to go in with. Um, in business circles, they call it like the founder's dilemma. So, like founders of companies, they made a certain number of decisions to get their company, like inventors and think about like the tech space. But then they get
Yeah.
to a point where they're managing a mature company and they don't take the risks that they used to because there's other things at stake. And it's like, well, they have to shift their mindset. And it's like one of those things where they fall into the trap of doing the thing that they because when we get stressed, we usually go back to our comfort zones, and our comfort zones
Yeah.
we know well, right? We can crank that up, but then it becomes numbing, and you have to like check yourself periodically and push yourself beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just really, because art's meant to be playful, like it's meant to be emotional, it's meant to be
Yeah.
exciting. If you're not evoking some sort of emotion
Something.
from your
Yeah.
art,
Yeah.
then what are you doing? Like there's
Yeah. Yeah.
there's AI for that. like,
Right. Right. Oh, that's another topic in itself.
yeah, like you know,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually think if you took away all the societal pressures of what art should or shouldn't be, creatives are like that. They are very playful but by
mhm,
nature and experimental by nature, but it does get pushed aside. In fact, the whole reason why we've built this podcast is because a very traditional photographer told me, and she's very, very good at what she does, like amazing images. It's not the work I want to produce though. And she was like, oh, you shouldn't do yours. Yours is a bit wild. Like no one wants that. You should just do family photography. I'm like, absolutely not. No way. No way am I doing family photography. And it's not because I hate families or I hate her
right?
photography.
But
I
there's no
love
joy in
her
it.
photography. It's amazing. It's just not me.
Well, and the thing is, like, there's a couple of reasons why that entire interaction is weird to begin with. One, it doesn't make business sense for anybody to say everybody should do it the way I do it, because then you're just competing on price, and at that point, like everybody's going to like undercut themselves until nobody's making any money, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and unless you're doing the type of volume of like like a giant conglomerate like Walmart, where you're just moving billions of products every day, or Amazon. Like, there's no reason to compete on price. Like, you have to come
Uh,
up with something that it is so niche and specific that, like, well, I'm the only one that does this, and I do it better than everybody because I'm the only one, and it becomes like that. But the other thing is, like, just for anybody in any creative field to think that there is one way to produce something, I don't know how long they've been doing it. Because
Mad.
that to me is just weird, because if you've gone through any creative endeavor, you probably come up with six different ways to do it, and you landed on the one you
Right?
like the best. But you know that the five others are there because you just went through it. So
Right.
it's weird for somebody to have that mentality to say this is the way that photography should look.
Yeah. And just bizarre. She actually the exact comment was something like, do the practical and show the bizarre, or something like that, but do the practical. So what's practical? Like, what are people going to pay for? I was like, but people do pay. People are booking me. So
Yeah, yeah.
but I actually think it had she she sells a how to be a family photographer course.
Oh, okay.
So I think she was trying to push that narrative, but I was like, no, I just left the table. I was like, I'm the part of this Facebook group. It's like, this table is not serving me, so I'm
Yeah.
leaving. Bye. I said nothing and just left, and then made a TikTok, and then you got in touch.
And then now we're here
Yeah,
because,
yeah, I love it though. I
like,
love
yeah,
it.
for me that's just it's a wild conversation. But you find that a lot in people. People discover something that is successful for them, and they assume that's the way. And the thing is, that's not how anything works.
That's not
Like,
how life works. Like,
no, like when you see, like, I mean, you think about like any tutorial book that you've ever seen in like a bookstore, like if I'm not a parent myself, but all of my friends are, right?
yeah,
And I know this for a fact that, like, if you have two or more kids in the house, whatever you did with the first one is probably not going to work with the second one. Like, you got to do it
completely
differently.
different
Like
personalities.
it's
Yeah,
not like
yeah,
there's like one way to raise a kid, because like it's because individuals are different, and that's just the way it works. And like,
yeah,
you have to adjust at some point. It's a new dynamic now. Like, you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
just write a book on one way on how to do this and say that that is the definitive instruction manual for how to live life. Like, that's not how life works.
Ridiculous.
No.
I find it even more bizarre that it came from a creative person. Like,
Yeah.
I would expect that kind of outlook from someone who's maybe of the older generation, or very traditional in how they've been brought up and their education and what their current job role is, but not someone who's actually in that field. I was like, so yeah, odd.
Well, back before,
But
like, pre-COVID, pre-COVID was super convenient. Like, then I adopted a dog during COVID, which makes like doing day trips a little bit more difficult. But pre-COVID, I went full time in 2019, so I had a full year of like figuring it out. But like when I would get into a creative rut, I would go up to New York City with a film camera, and like I have like this old like 1970s
oh wow.
Nikon FE, put a couple rolls of film in my pocket, take that up, go up to New York City, and just wander the streets for a couple hours, and then take the train back down. And so, like,
Yeah, some really awesome shots.
yeah, it's just that it would just be a place for me to just say, I just need to reboot my thinking, and I just need,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
Um,
tell me about your like your journey into this, because you said you did it part-time before, but I know you did other things before, right?
yeah, I did several other things before. So, my path is all over the place. Where I originally started college, or university, as you would call it, as or uni, as an architecture major, and I did that for 2 years. But at the time, I didn't have my head together as far as like what I want to be when I grow up, and is this what I
Yeah.
want to do? So I switched schools, I switched majors. I got a degree in business with a concentration in marketing, because I figured with that I can get that's flexible. I can
Stunning.
get a job, and I can get a
Yeah.
job, and then I'll figure it out. Like, once I start like working, um, I'll figure it out down the road. That's flexible enough for me to get moving.
Yeah.
So I started working at an investment management company here. They actually have a London office. I think that's why I knew the time difference, because I've worked on projects with like the London team,
Ah,
and, and,
okay, okay.
and we would have to like hop on a call. Um, but so I did that. I was in problem resolution. Then I got into statistics. So we were like me and two friends, like we were put on this team to do statistical analytics on process improvement and efficiencies. And so we went out to like the bookstore. We bought books on statistics. We were basically teaching ourselves on the fly how to
Wow.
do modeling, and we were doing that. And then I got into like investor behavior analytics, but I was doing cool stuff, but I missed creative. So I went
Yeah.
back to school at night and at a different school and got my architecture degree. So that was going to be the plan. I was going to finish that, and I was going to go into architecture. I was going to go design buildings. But while I was in the midst of doing that, so here in the US, to become a licensed architect, you have to have a professional degree in architecture, which is a little bit longer than your normal degree.
Yeah.
You have to do at least 3 years of an internship at a firm. Now it's a paid internship, but you have to like, you're working at the bottom rung.
Yeah.
And then there's like 6 or 7, I forget, licensing exams you have to take, and you usually space them out over a couple of years.
Yeah.
And when it was around time where I would be eligible to do my internship, 2008, and the financial collapse here happened, and like most of my architect friends were all laid off and they were out of work, and it was
Oh
just like,
God.
why would you
Scary
go into
times.
this? So a friend of mine at my company, he worked on the design side. So he worked on the websites, and he said, "Come
Yeah.
over and do user experience design." And I was like, "I don't know anything about web design at all. Like that's not my forte." And he said he broke it down. He's like, "It's architecture with a different building material. Do that here." And for him, he came up in graphic design. That's what his background was in.
Oh,
And
okay.
he's like, design is design. It's like the materials are different. The thought process is the same. Bring that here. I can,
Yeah.
because I have people who do the code. I don't need you to code stuff. I need you to think through an experience. And that's like somebody walking into a room is the same as somebody landed on a page. And, you know, is it a window? Is it a button? Is it like, what is it? And those are doors and those are access points. And think about it like structurally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I ended up doing that. And then when I graduated, I just, because I was going to school at night, I had all of this newly found free time, and it just a need for a new creative outlet. So I had a camera that I used for like site visits for school projects, like somewhere in the city you're going to do a pretend building on this site. So you take your photos and kind of get an idea of what the layout is. And an old neighbor of mine was a sports photographer. He was doing that, and he's like, oh, we'll break out that camera. We'll walk around the city. I'll show you how to use it. So he was the one who actually taught me like long exposure and how to what I was looking at with the settings with manual and figuring it out.
Yeah.
And it was like one of those things where he and I would just walk. We would take a couple hours and just wander around the city and just take street scenes. And so like early on, I was just doing, and then I was starting to get like active on Instagram around that time. And early on, I was doing like very architectural type things. I was doing buildings and textures and shadows and light and like playing with like shapes and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I started to slowly incorporate people into my images, so street scenes and cafes, and get the little scenes going on.
Yeah.
And then a couple meetups here and there, I ended up doing portraits a couple times just to test it out. And then portraits was the first time it felt like design again. Like it wasn't like I was just out there like just waiting for something to happen. I was
Yeah.
interacting with people. I was talking to them about them. And then we're like, okay, well then let's make this together and let's collaborate. And then that felt like an actual thing. So I started doing more portraits. And um, at one point I set up a Instagram account for a portrait challenge because I was interested in this notion that we all see things differently. So I would get a volunteer model. We would choose 3 locations, and then we would get 3 other photographers, and then I would post the different results. But meanwhile, I was there, kind of hosting it. I was also taking my own portrait, so I was also learning what I liked. But it was like a way to like, oh, we're all at the same setting with the same individual, but we're coming up with very different ideas for what looks.
And I love that.
Yeah,
That's
so it
really
was like one
cool.
of those things, and yeah, I did that for. So I started to build a portfolio of portraits, and then I started to get like requests for like similar to you. Somebody would
Yeah.
DM me on Instagram saying, "Hey, like, what do you charge for this?" And at the time, I'm like, I don't at all. Like that's not how I do any of these things. Um, but then I started to think, okay, maybe this is a business that I can do. And what is that? And then so in 2019, I went full time, and started doing portraits. But I still hadn't figured out like what it is I do, like I knew that I was good enough for people to reach out to hire me, but it wasn't enough to have. I didn't have a niche. I was just kind of fuddling along, and
So how did you figure it out? How did you figure out where to go from there?
so COVID happened.
Oh yeah.
COVID happened, and so so I have a background in marketing, I have a background in web design, I have a background in I have several backgrounds in business and things like that. And I sat down, I'm like, my website doesn't tell a story at all. Like it was just I built one and I put it up. It didn't tell, like it wasn't doing what I did. And so I had a couple of weeks where I just was doing nothing. So I'm like, all right, well, let me rethink what I'm doing. Now my first year I took a month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'd love to tell like a variety of mental health stories, everything from managing daily stress to like hospitalizations and everything in between. Like the idea being is that we all have to deal with mental health. Some people have
Yeah.
mental illness, but we all have to deal with mental health. And so I did 31 stories for 31 days of May. And it was
I
like one
remember
of
you
those things
saying.
where I talk to people about their story. Okay, so tell me how, like, so you suffer from anxiety. What does that feel to you? How does that like manifest? And like, okay, well, how do we represent that into a single image? And so I did that, and then I kind of I put it out there. I did a little show on it and everything else. It was it was well received. But then I kind of went back to like my day to day. And when I was sitting down, I was talking to a friend of mine who's also in marketing. He's like, dude, your whole thing is that you can do stories. And so when I
Yeah.
look back, when I was doing statistics, I was taking complex data and simplifying it into a narrative that leaders could understand so that they could make decisions. When I was doing UX design, I was taking retirement planning and for here we have 401ks. People they have to save for their own retirement. Taking retirement planning and simplifying it into an interface that they could then manage, like they could actually do it, manage it
Yeah.
for themselves. And then I'm like, oh, I take these like messy stories of life. Like, what is that? Like, because we're all complex, and I help them simplify it into a single image that gives them that story. And what does that look like? So that's when I start to focus on, okay, really what I want to do is I want to tap into people's passions and personalities and make sure that they have at least a a single image, if it's a family, if it's like just themselves, if it's a high school senior, whatever it is, a single image that hangs in their home that they have
Yeah.
forever, because then that's a story they always get to tell. And I'm like, okay,
And
that's what I do. So that's kind
how,
of
how
where I landed.
from that point, so you've done all this other stuff, and from that point, how did you go about like how do I market that? Because when someone, I don't know, like Google's a photographer, they might be looking for something specific, but they wouldn't say photographer who tells a story
Right.
of my life.
So
So how did you do that?
for me, my best marketing is me speaking to people. So I have to go to this networking event. So I'm at like different like lunches, and I'm having one-on-one conversations and get somebody excited and pass it on, and then they tell other people about now COVID was tough because nobody was having people over, right?
Yeah.
There was not a lot of people like hanging out at different people's houses. Now you're starting to see, oh, they see something of mine on the wall, they ask about it, and then the conversation. So mine is very much a
Nice.
referral-based business, but I have to establish relationships. So it's a lot of legwork because I'm not really the guy that you Google, because most of the requests I get via Google, they're just looking for, oh, I have a 1-year-old birthday party, I just need something for Facebook, which is fine.
Yeah, yeah.
There's plenty of
But it's
photographers
not
to do that, but that's not what I
right.
do. And so
Right.
that's usually that's usually what I'm getting via Google, where they just land on my website. Although my website explains what I do.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just one of those things where I have to build relationships with a lot of people. It,
Sure.
it's a it's an asset that I'm a chatty extrovert. So I don't mind going into a room of people I don't know and just starting conversations because
Me too, me
right.
too.
So
My partner always laughs that like I can take it like we can take each other to like a work party or something. And we probably won't see each other all night because we'll be off like gas bagging to other
Yeah.
people, complete strangers who we don't know, just because we're both chatty extroverts as
Right.
well. But that's a great skill to have, though, right? As an artist, as a photographer, because you work with people, right? So
Right.
that's a great skill to have.
And especially because like, I see a lot of things like and I don't know how you feel about this. I think the most important asset that a photographer has is making the subject feel comfortable with themselves in front of a camera, because like
Yeah,
everybody gets
absolutely.
stiff, right? And there's certain things that you can kind of direct posing and things like that. But I have noticed if I direct too much, it gets more awkward looking. So most of what I'm doing is conversational, just to
Yeah.
get their true. I I don't want them to be a prop in my image. I want the image to be starring them. So I want the
Well,
real them to come through.
and you want it to be a nice experience for them. You want them to go away going, oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I did that. Like I love that. I experienced that. One of the things I've luckily been told feedback on is that I make people feel good, which is really nice because
yeah,
one of the girls was I photographed was really, really shy and really anxious about coming in, and she was very quiet. And she's on one of my reviews, she literally put, she made me feel so much better immediately as soon as came in. And I think again, that's down to just being chatty and conversational, like you said, like
yeah,
la la la. So
yeah.
yeah, it's good.
But I think
So
that
when
that's
you say
part of the
these,
asset. Like that's technically I can make the camera do certain things, but it's that interaction and it's like that moment because I'm sure you've run into this. Like sometimes it's the moments in between the staged images that's the true personality, and that's the one that you love. Like it's like
yeah,
that may not be what you were going for, but when you look at it later, you're like, that's the one I love because
that's the
that's
one.
the
Yeah,
person. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've even gone so far as I've put them in a position and taken a photo, but their facial expression's quite straight. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
to say it. And then I've happened to catch them in between poses and they've done a different face and I've cropped that face on because I was like, perfect. Because they've just relaxed a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe at the start, and they've just relaxed in between. So you're like, got you, got you, got you.
Yeah.
So it's good. So these networking events, are they like, because I'm just thinking if someone's listening to this now and they're like, oh, I want to get into the arts or I want to get into photography, these networking events, are they other photographers? Are they businesses? Are they families? Like, how do you
Yeah,
do
it's
it?
mostly other business people. So most of these events are people from a variety. So, your local chamber of commerce, like here, I don't know if you guys have something similar in the UK, but like most areas have like a chamber of commerce, and they are,
Yeah, we have those.
it's like groups of business people, and they'll have lunches and happy hours and things like that. Um, Eventbrite is a great one to like look up. I think Meetup is another one. Like there's
Yeah,
websites for people gathering. Um, you just need to have more. You just have to have conversations. Like you just have to like
yeah.
get the ball rolling and and some of them, it doesn't always work out, and it's like sometimes you get stuck with somebody who has a really boring business, and you
You're
feel
like,
like you're just like, okay, this isn't gonna, this is gonna pivot into a
yeah,
client for me, and I'm not interested in what they're doing.
yeah.
But like that's part of the deal, and so I usually go and now like with COVID, you know, there's it seems like half of them are Zooms. So like
Okay, that's interesting.
you hop onto a Zoom. A lot of them, what they do is like maybe like let's say 30 or 40 people log in, and then they'll do like breakout groups with like 3 or 4 people, and you get to talk about each other.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and you do that kind of stuff. So I prefer the in person. I think that there's a little bit more
Yeah, yeah,
that comes through as
yeah,
far as like passion about what I do when I'm in person. But
yeah,
it's also a way to get conversations with more people.
yeah.
And I
I
think
guess it
like
saves on petrol and time as well, though, right?
yeah. Oh, I mean, it was super convenient. I mean, I remember like when COVID happened, a lot of people pivoted to there was a lot of people doing online networking. There was a lot of Zoom
Yeah,
calls, and you could go through 3 or 4 a day. Like there was always something going on because everybody's itching for something because all of their normal ways of getting business were just like thrown out the window.
not
Like
working.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so it's like okay, so now there's a bunch of people on these calls, and I notice now, you know, I could have gotten on a Zoom and there's like 100 people on there, and now there's maybe like 25. So it's you know,
Oh, okay.
well, because people are out and about
Then,
doing other things and they don't necessarily have the time to hop on this particular Zoom call or that particular Zoom call. They space them out a little bit more. Um,
but COVID essentially helped you like kind of set your roots in a
yeah,
little bit and get
it
established.
gave me the breather I needed to kind of say, okay, like I can't be in front of people right now. So what can I do with that? And
Yeah,
what
yeah.
and people because everybody's got unsolicited advice all over the place. So like, oh, I saw this article of like this person doing these porch portraits like with the masks on and like what I do is I want to make something memorable that they keep on their wall and like nobody can get their hair cut right now. Like nobody like the thing
Yeah.
like I'm not doing something for I want to do like something that's permanent. And is this the image that they want that's permanent? So I'm like, I'm just going to build my network. I'm going to go talk to as many people as I can, tell them what
Yeah.
I do. And then once things open up, I'm going to go back to them. I'm going to revisit. I'm going to make that connection.
And
Uh,
you've done it, which is awesome.
yeah. So, but yeah, so that's kind of how I do it. Like, but I have to like be proactive and get out and be at this thing or that thing. And sometimes that can be exhausting by itself because you're just like you're running from one thing to the next. But
Yeah, yeah.
part of the deal until there's a critical mass. Once I reach a critical mass of clients where they're just referring me, then I don't need to be everywhere all at once. But I'm starting
Yeah.
new, so I have to like I am not an established name in a lot of circles. So I have to like establish my name there and then build some credibility and then move on to the next thing. So
Yeah, yeah. I have this thing called cheeky bitch syndrome where um I'm just a bit cheeky with it. I will just blatantly ask things like, can I do that? Can I come photograph that? And I don't even care because I'm like, what's the worst? I'm not being offensive. The
yeah,
worst you can say is no. Like so as you know, I've been doing fantasy photography now for the last sort of 6 to 8 months. And just like 2 weeks ago, I saw this guy on TikTok who is he's called Danny Wright, and he was the pop punk prince. So our Radio One, which is our main station in the UK, named him Pop Punk Prince, and he was playing in London. And I was like, I'm just gonna put. So I cheeky bitched it, and I just messaged, and I was like, yeah, but have you got a like really creative photographer who could get some great shots for you? And then I did the little eye emoji like, and then I was like asking for myself, and he actually replied. And then 3 days later, I was down in London taking photos of him at his gig, which I found out I absolutely love gig photography, like love it. And then whilst I was there, I met someone else who is also a singer, which I think I talked about last week, who was on X Factor over here and a TV program over here, and I got with her really well, and she's booked me from that as well. And that's just me being like, just being cheeky, just
yeah.
like, so can I just putting yourself out into the position where there might be an opportunity that comes. It might not, of course, it might turn into nothing, but that what be lost, nothing.
There was and I'm gonna mess up all of it except for like the paraphrasing summary of it. There was I was listening to a guy who was interviewed. It was like a business podcast, and he would ask for random things throughout the day, like random stuff, like
The
go
hate clip.
go to the coffee shop and when ask, oh well, can I just have this coffee for free? And he was practicing getting no's, and he said you'd be surprised how many
Okay.
things people will give you if you just ask. And he's like, but he's
Yeah.
like, my whole intent was to practice getting no's and different things. But he said you'll find people are more welcoming and they will actually give you things like sometimes. And I'll have to look it up and I'll if maybe on a
But
subsequent
I
issue we'll bring it
agree.
up.
Like, so what if you get a no?
But
Like,
it's good
no,
practice. And
it's
another
good.
thing
It's
is,
good. It's good
no,
practice. It teaches you how to approach, but also if they say no, you haven't lost anything.
yeah.
Like,
Well, and 99% of the time, we're so self-absorbed with our own story that like, I it's like people are afraid of being embarrassed, right? They're like, but the thing is that how many interactions do you have with somebody in a day where like that may have been an embarrassing moment for them, and you forgot about it 2 seconds later because you got shit to do. And it's just
Yeah, yeah.
like it's like, unless it's like really like a yeah,
Like crazy.
yeah, like insane. Like if it's just a simple interaction, you just move on and you just go,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
because and they're going to forget about you in 3 seconds. Like that's just human nature.
That
So
that
like
did actually happen to
you're
me
not
at
the
the gig,
star in other people's story. You're the only
right?
it's only you're the star in your story and your story alone. Like nobody
Right.
else is worried about it, you know?
That the embarrassing moment did actually happen to me at the gig. So I was in the green room full of like him and this other girl I'd met and a couple of the like support bands, and I made a Friends reference and they didn't know it. And I was like, oh yeah, la la la, Phoebe Buffay, and they were like, and I was like, from Friends, and they were like, I was like, okay. But then I just moved on. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And they probably forgot the reference. They probably have since forgotten that you said it. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it would be hilarious if you see a TikTok like in the next couple of months, like you'll never believe what this woman said to me.
I
Like,
know, I know. I'll style it out. It's fine. That's the other thing is, don't get me wrong, I can be embarrassed, but I'm also I know that I'm a little bit I know that I'm a little bit out there sometimes, and I know that I say like, "Ah,"
yeah,
and so I'm kind of used to being slightly embarrassed, and I'm like, whatever.
whatever.
So if that did happen, I'd probably just style it out and be like, thanks for the publicity. Thanks. Oh dear. But yeah, these are cool stories though. I love how we've both got into it again from different angles.
Yeah.
Although I didn't know the marketing bit about you. I didn't know that. I knew the architecture, but I didn't know the marketing. And I was like, oh, has he told me that before? I don't know.
But what's funny is like that was like another aspect of like I never did marketing professionally. I did, but I learned how to tell a story. And with a brand, you're taking a brand and their history and everything else, and you got to distill it into something that the general public will understand. And so that has always been my thing. Like I learned how to do that, and now I just do it. I did it through a couple different ways, and now I do it through photography. So I take whatever the brand is, and now I distill it into an image rather than a tagline or some copy, things like that. So it's just a bit different, just a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
way to approach the exact same problem.
And ironically, I actually say on my website that storytelling is at the heart of everything I do. But you tell their real life stories where I want them to look like they're in some kind of dystopian world, or
Right.
like
And
it from a movie or a book or something like that. That's why I
yeah,
want it to look like each picture, like you've taken the screenshot straight from a movie or from straight from a book or something. That's how I
but
think
I love
tell
that
stories.
like that's your process. So because like for me, like you said, like I like to tell their biography. You're telling their fantasy, and that's why there are different sections of bookstores, right? Because
Right.
for different stories for different people, and I mean, you look at like and I know you're starting to get more into like talking to like the cosplay community, but like there are people for whom like with the live action role play and cosplay, like the living in that fantasy world is part of their passion. That is part of their story. And so
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
that's an element of their personality that should be celebrated because like that's important to them. And so like those types of things are like and like for me, like my tagline for my business is stories worth telling, right? Because I think everybody has
Love
a story
that.
worth telling. And
Yeah.
and it's just like what is what is it for you that's different? And like I don't know, I tap into the individualism, of every person. Every person's got a unique thing. Well, what is that? Because
Yeah.
that's the only thing that makes you different from everybody else. And so what is that? You know?
And do you know what? I am in real life, even though for photography I do fancy stuff. The reason why I always say I really love people, take it wrong, people could be assholes as well. But in general, I really like people. I like being around them. I feel
Yeah.
energized when I've been with people. Um, but the thing I like is, do you know if someone is like really successful, you think, what did you do? What's your story together? Or if they've come from really humble beginnings and they've changed their life around, or they've overcome things, or they show such a kind of talent or empathy or something like that. And I always think, tell me your story. Like, how have you got to this space where you hold that space for such empathy for others? Or tell me how you overcame those hardships and you managed to create this, whatever it might be, like this piece of art or a band, or
Mhm.
like you opened a restaurant or whatever it might be. And I love it. And I love listening to people's stories. I'm like, and then what? And then what did you do then?
Yeah. Well, it's like there was a Venn diagram I saw floating around like in business circles, and it had like, and I'll have to look it up because I'm probably wrong. We should probably have like a fact check section of this entire podcast. I'll just say shit and then it'll be half right. But
Yeah.
it's like, things that you're good at, things you enjoy, and things that people will give you money for. And so, like,
Yeah.
if you take the things you're good at and the things you enjoy, but if nobody's going to give you any money for you, that's a hobby. But if you merge all three of those things, then that's a calling. And like that's what you should be doing. It's that
Yeah.
it's that intersection. Because there's gonna be things that you're good at and things you're giving money for. But if you don't particularly like it, that's a job. And people have jobs. And
Right.
that might just be what you want. You just want to get something through the day. But if you were able to merge all three, like that's where like you fall into that space. But discovering those things is very difficult. Like uh,
Mm.
because there's a lot of people out there that say just do, if you're good at it and people will give you money for it. I don't care if you like it, just make as much money as you can. You could do the stuff you like on the side, and that is fair, like because that's reality. And life
It,
happens and you may just have to do that. But if you
it
can if you can find all three, then you're in a good
sweet
space.
spot.
Yeah.
I was brought up with that narrative as well, actually, about find something you're good at and that there's a deep demand for that people give you a lot of money for. And I don't at the end of the day, people, especially with the cost of living going up, like it's expensive. It's expensive to live. It's expensive to have kids. It's expensive to buy a house.
Yeah.
And not having enough money, like it's horrible. Like we've all been there. Like when I first came out of uni, and this is before I was working.
Mhm.
Like you feel skin and like, oh god, this I've got no money. Like, oh, this is awful. And so the reality is, sometimes you just have to do stuff you don't like to do. However, certainly for myself, long term, I think that's a dangerous spot to be in because I don't want to look back at my life. And this sounds very nostalgic and like, oh, yeah, you lived in cuckoo land, but I don't want to look back and be like, oh, well, at least I made lots of money. But where's the passion?
Right.
Like, where's the passion? Like, oh God, I can't, I don't ever want to have regrets that I didn't do something because it didn't bring me money.
Yeah.
Like, if tomorrow I woke up and I had never had a booking again, I would still continue to do this. And I
Mhm.
know then you said, oh, well, then that's a hobby. Yeah. But I would find a way to still be creative in my daytime as well.
Yeah.
I just can't. I think it's a dangerous narrative. I know you have to be realistic as well. And I do understand that. Oh, I definitely understand that. But yeah, I think it's a dangerous narrative to live your life with just that, oh, I don't care if you like it or not. Work is such a huge, massive, time consuming thing of your life that if you don't like it, I'm just like, what's the point? What's the
Yeah.
point? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I kind of went through that at one point. I mean, I went back to school and got another degree, like because I was just like, I'm just not enjoying it. It's like, I was making a decent living. I was, but I was just not enjoying the 8.5 hours that I was there. And I'm like, well, this is
Same
just
with me in
not fun.
teaching.
So like what, am I just gonna like, do I have to just do this for the next 40 years until I die?
Yeah, yeah.
And then like, so what's the joy? Now, I did work with people for whom that was their mindset. They have a bunch of kids. They got to run to this, run to that. They're like, I come in here, I do my job, and then I got like my life is outside of here. Like I got to do this for this, but I don't really. This doesn't bother me. Like, and there were people for whom that works for. They just come in and do the job, they make their money, and then they got all of their stuff happens after they clock out. Like all the stuff that they enjoy happens after
Yeah.
they clock out, and they're fine with that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that again, like what we're talking about, like creative paths. I don't think that there's one right path for any one person. I think that like you have to look into yourself and say, like, can I keep going and doing this, or do I go through burnout? And
Right.
or this is just something I do. And I do this, and then all of the stuff that brings me joy happens outside of work. I think that that's a perfectly fine path too.
Yeah.
If
And
that's what you want. But if you don't
yeah,
want that, then
right. That's the
it feels
difference.
like if you're sleepwalking through the day and you feel dead inside, like who wants to live like that? But if you
Right.
but if you're like, okay, well, I don't this doesn't bother me. Well, if it doesn't bother you, then keep going, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And that's the difference, because if it's something that you're like, I'm quite content with this, then that's cool. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Like that's what people try to get, is contentment in their life. But if you're only doing it because that's what you've been told you're meant to do,
yeah,
like there's a quote, I think it was Heath Ledger again, fact check this, but he said, everyone always asks, are you married? Do you have kids? How much do you make? Do you have a good, have you been on holiday? Have you got a fast car? Like it's some kind of fucking tick list that you're
yeah,
meant to get to. No one ever goes, are you happy?
yeah.
Excited to go up in the morning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so people go through life because they get told, oh, I should do this, and I should do this, and I should do this, because I was one of them.
Right.
Even though I explored creative fields, but I went to college and got married and I had a kid and all the things you meant to do, and I was like, I'm not actually happy though.
Right.
Hence why,
It's almost like framing life as a video game. Like, what level of life are you on? Well, I made it to level
right?
2. Like, it's just like what,
Although I
I
have started
collected all
calling
these
birthdays
coins.
levels.
I collected all these coins. I found the treasure, and now I'm on level 32. But there's
Right,
like, there's 150 levels, and so I have to keep plugging away and keep climbing these ladders to get there. Like,
right. And so, yeah, I just think it's important, whether you're in the creative fields or not, to be fair, that you just look at, is this what you want to, because sometimes you're like, oh, I'm quite happy with this, and you might be happy with that for 10, 15, 20 years, 25 years, and
yeah,
then suddenly wake up and go, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's okay too. But I think it's important to be aware, very self-aware of, is it what you want, or is it what you've been told you should have? Is this the life you want to pursue, whether for your career, for your job, for your creativity, for whatever it is? Or is it you just following what you've been told by society?
yeah.
We're going to a whole new thing now, but yeah, I'm really passionate about it just because I did that.
But I do think,
Um,
and I think that we are probably going to run into this just based upon the conversation that I've had with other artists, is the notion art as a business is always looked at like that's a hobby, and like art as a business is not really looked at in the same way of like say STEM fields like the science and technology, mathematics, and it's just it is. But the thing is that as humanity, back to like cave drawings, and we have always made art in some way, and
right,
so it's part of our evolution. We've always done it. People buy, people buy art. People like appreciate art. So you need people to make it. You need people to make music, and you need people to write books, and you need people to make things that go on the wall, and you need like somebody's going to have to do it. That's when it becomes a profession, and that's like it's just like but I think a lot of artists, as they're coming out, it's like okay, if
starving artist type thing.
right, like the notion of the starving artist is like, well, does that really have to be true? And mostly because when you go to like art school, you're not taught like I went to architecture school. The only reason why I know how I would run an architecture business if I had an architecture business is because I went to business school. Like,
Yeah,
like if like in architect, I learned how to make buildings. I didn't learn how to run an architecture business.
right.
So you get the skills, and then you go out into the world. And I think a lot of artists like they learn how to do their skill, and they go out into the world. And it's like, well, now the real life is, and how do I make this into a business? And by the way, they have entirely different degrees for that skill set. It's a totally different skill set is to
And
pivot into a business.
and for me myself, it's something that I find the hardest bit. Like I'm a creative, like I find the business side really, really difficult. Like I have a hard time with it. And I hate, like I just hate the business side of stuff. Like I'm just like, I just want to create. Ah. And then the reality of like stuff and working out business overheads and stuff like that. And it is a completely different skill set. And it's something, yeah, that if I struggle with it, other creatives must struggle with it as well,
Yeah.
right? So I'm learning, I'm trying not to be so flexible with stuff as in business side of it and
Yeah.
be a bit, yeah, I'm a bit like, oh, it's okay, we can allow that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm trying to not do that. But it's a skill in itself for sure.
Right. And it's something like you have to learn and you have to practice, and it doesn't feel natural at first. It's like you got to go through the whole thing until it's like, you know, like pricing. Pricing is a big thing for artists, like,
It's
yeah,
awful.
especially if it's a passion.
Pricing.
Like, I heard another, like, it was like I think it was Brene Brown on her podcast. Somebody was talking about like, you know, charging for like the things that they are like. It's a skill that you have that somebody else doesn't have, and it's like it feels tough to like charge for that because it could be easy to you, and so it feels weird because you have a talent in it. And she had gotten the advice from a business coach of hers when she was like doing um, her consulting business that she was building out. And he's like, no, no, no. If you can do something that no one else can do, that's your gift. And you should be charging more for that. Like just add on to it because they can't do it. And so that's your gift and it makes you special. And so I think sometimes we have to remember that like the things that we create, we're doing it differently and but that's our gift. It's that we do that.
Yeah. And just going to photography as well is so again, if you're not in the photography, you think they just rock up, take a few photos, take out pose, and then go home and then send you the digitals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not it at all. I know you run your business where you have it framed and you look at where it's going to be in the wall and you go into
Yeah.
real detail. Um, and certainly with my post production, like my editing can take like up to 5 hours per photo if
Mm-hmm.
it's a fantasy one. Um, so there's all that time depending on how many photos they want afterwards as well. So and then it's the prep beforehand. So I'll create a mood board, I'll have a meeting with them, we'll go through different looks,
Yeah.
where the setting's going to be. I'll go out scouting for locations, or if we're going to do a studio, then I'll look at the lighting setup. So there's so much work that goes in before drawing and after, and people just think, and that's what you've got to pay for, right?
Yeah.
But when you're not behind the camera, when you're just the only bit you're seeing is you rocking up, posing, and then going home, you're like, oh, what am I paying for? Like this is a lot of money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's trying to convey that and not looking like you're just money grabbing and you are actually providing value. I think that's the difficult part.
There's an old adage, and again, I'm gonna like butcher it, but you get the gist. So, a guy had a problem with his pipe. He calls a plumber. Plumber comes out, takes out a wrench. Yeah, listens to it, takes out the wrench, bangs the pipe in one place, and it's fixed. And he said that'll be $250. And he's like, $250? You just banged the pipe. He said it took me 15 years to know where exactly to hit that pipe.
Yeah.
That's what you're not paying for the moment I hit the pipe. You're paying for all the time it took me to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like part of that process. It's like
Yeah.
there's a lot in there that goes into like you're not paying for the shutter snap. Like you're paying
Yeah.
everything that went into that becoming a moment, you know?
And then of course the overheads as well. This sounds like I'm going on a rant now, and I'm not at all. But like I didn't even consider how many overheads I'd have, like the website, and then my domain, and then the email subscription, and then my Adobe package, and then I kind of knew about that one to be fair, but and then just like yeah, like loads of things, and then like buying equipment, like lenses are freaking expensive.
Yeah.
Not that I get one every month or anything, but like I'm looking at them going, oh, yeah, that's quite expensive. I'll come back to that.
But I think that's part of the thing too. It's like knowing which lens to use. Like that's
Right.
a different skill. Like for most of my portrait work, I use an 85. I love that thing. But sometimes I need a 50, and sometimes um,
Nifty 50.
I did a video on like these are like 26, like an iPhone is like a 26 millimeter, so it's a wide angle lens. It's not a real view of a person at all. So it's
Yeah.
like knowing it's having the skill to know that there's a difference in the lenses that you're using.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I've got a shoot coming up on Saturday actually, and it's going to be kind of a portrait shoot, but then we are doing some like long distance one because she's going to be on a motorbike. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna need my 400 for that, like my big fat lens,
yeah,
and yeah, again, that was not cheap.
no,
And again, knowing that I'm going to need more than one lens on that shoot,
yeah,
yeah. So,
that's part of the thing.
but it is, but it's all interesting. It's all part of the process. But I feel like if you're on the receiving end, you don't necessarily understand that.
Well, and to be fair, that's not a conversation you're having with clients because they honestly don't give a shit
No,
like all of
no,
that, and nor should they. So it's really just about like how do you explain the value that you're providing to them, like the reason why you have to charge what you charge is because of all this stuff. But like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
nobody else's problem but yours. Now you
yeah,
have to like say, okay, but what value am I providing to justify that? And that's what's
mm,
missing. And so I think sometimes we focus on like all this stuff, and really the client only cares about this stuff. So it's like telling the story that they need to hear, which is I charge this much because of this. And like so for me, I do wall pieces. They're going to be printed. They're going to be in in a living room, or they're going to be in a den, or whatever it is. And it's for me, I'm selling them on every day when you walk past that, you're going to feel a certain way. That's what you're
yeah,
paying for when you do that. Like you're just going to, it's just going to be there. And every time you host a dinner party and you go get to talk about that, that's what you're paying for.
yeah.
It becomes a piece that it gives you a mood. And so that's what you're paying for. They don't care
And
about the lenses I needed to do that.
no,
They just want to
no,
say, oh, okay, like that's what it is. It's
yeah,
I'm paying for the moment that they turn the corner and it puts a smile on their face because it's their kids or it's their pet or whatever it
yeah.
is, and that's the moment you're paying for.
In
And
marketing,
paying
it'd
for
be your
that.
USP.
What's that?
In marketing, it would be your what is your USP, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, you're right. And do you say the word investment? Oh, this is an investment because I've heard that with
yeah. I
clients
so I
quite a lot.
use so I use very yeah. So I've definitely changed my language. So when I initially talk to a client, I'll talk to them about like like you're going to invest in artwork. Um, it's and that's what I do here. I don't call them shoots. I call them sessions. And that took me a while to like get that out of
Why is that? Why do you call them sessions instead of shoots?
because photo shoot feels like it feels very fashion like magazine oriented. Like this is a session. We're going to sit down and I'm going to work with you on it. It's not like you're a professional. I got a bunch of lighting. I'm going to fire off a bunch of stuff with the it's not that it's not that controlled. It's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah,
Feels a little bit different. Um, so I use language in a way that like converts to it's less jargon and more we're gonna have a consultation. We're gonna have a portrait session. So I call it a portrait session, and then your art selection meeting, and then like those are the so I use that language to kind of set up like this is going to be different than what you thought it might be,
yeah,
and so it also breaks the paradigm of what they think a photo shoot is. Like
yeah, yeah.
we're not doing that. Like we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Like um, I often say to people, 80% of the experience with me, I do not have a camera in my hand. So we're like this. You're not hiring me for the camera in my hand. You're hiring me for all the other stuff that we're going to work on together, and we're going to
Yeah.
make. So it's that's part of the
That's a
deal.
really cool way of doing it. And I guess you must get really positive responses because it feels really like tailored to them as well, right?
Well, and that's the goal. Like that's for me is the goal. It's like and because of my background like in architecture, like I treat it like if you were remodeling your kitchen. Like we're you don't just have a contractor show up and just remodel your kitchen without having some discussion on your style and your taste and
And what
how do you
colors
want
and
to how do you
finish.
want to work with this like and that keeps for me that keeps what I do interesting because like to be honest with you if it were up to me like if it were just my aesthetic everybody's getting black and white images printed on metal and like that's what everybody's getting because I love those I love that industrial aesthetic and the
Yeah, yeah,
contrast of black and white and I just adore that look. But that doesn't work in every house. It doesn't work in every room. It doesn't work for every
Right.
client. And so like I like to sit down with them and say, what, tell me about your style. Like I'm I have a certain skill set, but it's not because I have a singular focus on I only make this. I want to see what your space looks like. I want to, okay, you have warm tones in this place. Like we're going to do something with at sunset in a field, like we're going to get some colors to go along with this because this is going to last longer than your couch, but
Yeah.
you picked this couch out for a reason. And so we want to pull that together. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so I try
And
to
then I guess if they've got wood
engagement.
in there,
What's
if
that?
they've got if they've got wood furniture, you'd say, "Oh, I'm going to frame it in wood as well," or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. It was just look at like, and that's just kind of how I look at it. Now, other photographers who do prints that they consider it a single piece of art, and it's going to fit because it's a single piece of art. Me, I look at it as because of my background in architecture, I look at it as how does it integrate into the experience that you have in here,
Yeah,
and knowing that like people buy things because they like things. So if you have a certain design style, nobody really changes wholesale their whole design style. Nobody hires an interior designer and then like goes from country cottage to like you stainless steel modern in an instant. Like that's not their vibe. That's not how they carry themselves. So it may not be exactly what it is 20 years from now. It may not fit,
yeah,
but it at least fits with their particular aesthetic, what they like.
yeah,
Because and that keeps it interesting for me because then it becomes a design problem for me. And so I get
yeah,
to
yeah,
figure that out. Like it's just not, I'm not making only things that I like, I'm making things that they like. Because I'm going to look at the image for a certain period of time. They're going to look at it for the rest of their life. So it's not about me being happy, it's about them being happy
yeah,
because I'm going to put it up on their wall, and unless they invite me over, I'm never going to see it again. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I get that, and I guess that's where you then become super valuable. You're just not just a photographer anymore. You become super valuable because you're offering that unique experience for them, and
well,
with
and
a long lasting kind of souvenir.
yeah, and for me, like that was like something to differentiate from maybe other people in this space is that like I needed to come up with this like something that makes me different. I have a degree in architecture. I understand design and space and proportions and style. So that's something that I have. I if I use it correctly, then that becomes an asset for my business because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
something that I came with, you know. Um,
I,
and
I,
like for you with your marketing and design background, it's the culmination is the fantasy images because you know how to tell a story and
and performing
that
arts
out of thin
background a
air,
little bit
right?
as well.
Yeah, and the perform. So like that was um, Steve Jobs did a commencement speech at Stanford University probably 15 years ago, and it's all about like connect. You can't connect the dots going forward. You can only look at where you are and say, oh, because of that thing, this is where I am now. Like the reason why computers have different fonts on there is because when he decided to drop out of college, he sat in on a calligraphy class because he thought it was interesting. And he learned about typography and he thought it was beautiful. So when they were designing the first Mac, he said, we're going to have different fonts. And then Microsoft did the same thing. And now you have different fonts on word processing because he went to a calligraphy class because he was dropping out of school anyway and he didn't care. So looking
It
back,
had
that's
that
why.
knock-on effect.
Right. And so like for all of us, like our art becomes a culmination of the path we took to get here. And so like
Yeah, yeah.
that's that's how
Which again, then that gives us our unique thing, right?
right. And it's the only thing we have that from a business standpoint, the only thing we have to differentiate ourselves is that we are in fact different. And so if we lean into what makes us different, then that makes us special, and then we can market that because it's a unique thing.
But so the I've only worked with a handful of brands, but the ones I have worked with have all been like theatrical or experience brands where you go and it's like interactive experience.
Mhm.
And one of the brands I work for, who's one of my clients, they do like have you heard of something called Horrible Histories? I don't know if you guys have it in America.
What's
Horrible
that?
History. Do you have Horrible Histories in America?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's like it teaches like I'd say kids under like 15, like about history, but they do it in like any of the gory bits, they kind of act it out and
Okay.
do it a little bit softer, so it's not quite so
Yeah.
like um
Right. It's funny and informative, but not traumatizing. Like,
yeah, right. So part of their experience was that for kids, but then the other half was like an interactive experience for like horror fans. So they wanted two separate audiences. So in my mind, from marketing point of view, it was like, okay, so how are you going to get these two audiences? And I talked to them about their like their branding, and they only hired me as a photographer, but I ended up going into their branding and where do they tend to get these like customers from with the two different audiences, and how are we going to differentiate, and blah 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 blah. um so that my marketing, even though my marketing is all in health, but it's the same kind of thinking about your audience, and that came in really handy, me asking those questions. But as I said, the style of my photography means that all the brands I've worked with, I've never worked with like a clothing brand or anything like that. It's always been like I worked with a university dance troupe as well. I went and did their shows
yeah,
and things like that, um, which is cool, which I really enjoyed. And the whole thing of me, I went to that gig like 2 weeks ago. That's kind of again in the same kind of realm. I know it's not fantasy, but like it's the theatrical. And
yeah.
again, that's going back to I used to teach English and performing arts. So yeah, it's kind of come full circle.
I mean, I could see you like even getting into the like marquee posters for theater productions, like where they
Yeah, yeah,
create something for the shows that's going on. Like, all right,
yeah, yeah.
I can help you with your actors. We can create something that like draws people in, and it's like it's part of that story.
Well, the brand that I was on about with the experience brand, they are having stuff going on like billboards,
Hmm.
some of my photos, which is really cool, um, outside their venue and stuff. So
Yeah,
I essentially have kind of done that already. Um, but yeah, I can do that. And I would love to do like album covers or like movie posters,
yeah,
which I think I've said before. Just 'cause I just love it. I just love the drama of it. I just love how dramatic they are.
yeah.
So
But I mean, you think about like um I mean, I know like just based upon like some of that the way the algorithm works. So I like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like I watch all that stuff, and
yeah,
as soon as the new movie poster drops, like there's just it's people just talking about the poster. Like what what can we do? Because I'm not. I just like to watch the stuff when it comes out. I don't need to like parse it out into like try to discover. It's not a puzzle I need to solve, but there's an entire niche of people who like go through the posters of like because it's telling its own story of what's what are we going to find out like and they try to discover it. So yeah, if you land one of those contracts and you'll be set for life.
I mean, I don't know how to even go about it. Like, I live in like Lincoln, which is like a small city in England, nowhere near flipping LA or anything. But oh, it would be a dream. But I think I could do it. Like, I think my style suits it.
Yeah,
Like, and that might sound like a bit big-headed or delusional, but I'm like, I feel like I could do it. Like,
well,
if someone came to me and said that, I wouldn't. I'd be like, holy shit! But I wouldn't be like, no, I can't do that. I'm not. I can't. I wouldn't even know where to start. I'm like, I know exactly where I start. I know exactly what I would do.
well, I mean, there's enough stuff made in London. Like, is there like, are you close enough where you can make a connection with people in like the film industry? Because there is a film industry in London. Like,
Yeah. So because I used to, so I said I used to teach English and performing arts, right? I used to teach the kids that go into the West End. So it's not
okay,
quite film, but I used to train them in performing arts to go into the West End. So I've got some contacts there. And then I've got quite a few actor dancer friends as well, which you'll see on this podcast. So I have got connections, but actors don't necessarily know the designer or photographer of the poster that's, do you know what I mean?
right. But that's part of building your network, right?
Right.
Like you may not know that person, but like there's the whole 6 degrees of separation. You're really only 6 people away. Like, and
Uh,
if you really looked at your network, you might be 2 or 3 people away. And then it
right.
goes like
I
the edge.
probably am, to be fair.
Yeah,
I
and
know
it could
quite a
be just
lot.
like hey, do you know who handles this? And if they say, oh yeah, that's so and so, they sit down the hall. hey, I would love an introduction. Like, it's just like one of those things, like, and maybe it goes nowhere, but like, it's almost like looking at the place you want to get to, and like, you probably know at least 3 people that can get you there. And it's like, okay, well, I just got to daisy chain them together until, and it may take a year, but like, you start the conversations and you just start to like work your way towards those things.
I actually did something today where I was like, oh, I really liked that gig. Like, I really loved it. I want to do some more. I was like, and then I was looking up like about getting more into that as well. I'm still keeping my fantasy stuff, but I kind of incorporated the two on the one I just did. And I was like, oh, how do I get into that? I was like, I don't want to start off small because go big or go home. So I was like, so I looked up some very big bands. I mean, very, very famous bands that are currently touring in the UK. And I dove a bit deeper and dove a bit deeper and eventually found the emails of the people who were handling their publicity. And I was like, do I email them? Do I email them? And I was like, it would probably sound better if I said I was doing photography for a magazine. So then I was looking up magazines and I was like, I could email them and be like, I've got this idea for this and blah, blah, blah. And again, cheeky bitchness, right?
Yeah.
I don't care. But it's all that was to do with the whole networking thing. And I was like, right, who do I know there? And I was looking at people there. I've been doing that pretty much like before we started this for the past 2 hours before that, just like going no, and like deep diving. So if I end up at one of this famous person's show, I'll let you know. They'll probably go, who's that? No, go away. Stop. But or they might go, fuck yes, come along. I'll be
Right.
like, yeah, I will do. I will.
Yeah, like the answer is always no if you don't ask. So
right,
like, so it's 100% no to 50% no. So
right.
well,
I'm taking those chances.
so,
I'm
so
taking those chances.
you've just made your odds better just by asking. So
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm in my late 30s now. I'm like, I feel like sometimes when you, especially when you're first starting out in any industry, you can feel a little bit like, and now I'm like, ah, go on then,
yeah.
do it. So that's like kind of my attitude. So, right, what time are we on? 8:32. So we've done like an hour. I feel like we've covered some good stuff, right?
I think we did.
Yeah, it was good. And it came so naturally to us both as well, which is good.
Well, and I think that, like, again, like I go back to, for any of you who might be watching this at home, we honestly have no idea what we're doing and we're just figuring it out. But that's part of the creative process. The part of the creative process is like, okay, we think that these conversations are happening. We know we were having the conversation. We thought, oh, maybe other people would benefit from having these conversations. And so that's why we decided to do this. So we appreciate any support. We're going to get better. We're going to keep going. And you're going to hear a lot less from us in the next, as we move forward, because we're going to be really just delving into, like, these were our stories. And we know there are hundreds of other stories out there, and we want to tell those.
Absolutely.
Get people to tell those. So we're just going to tap into first with the people we know, and we know a lot of artists in our own circles, and we'll start out and hear these different stories. But I think my hypothesis is what we're going to find is that, like, a lot of the parts are fundamentally different, but there's a core thread that we all share, and like that's what connects us. And we are people who create things for other people, and that is something that we all do. And we just and it's never streamlined. It's always messy, and I think we're going to find that more and more as we go.